Today, we are diving into the book of 2 Samuel. And let me tell you, this isn't some dry collection of ancient laws. Oh no. This is pure political drama, a family saga, and it's all centered on the incredible and incredibly messy life of one of history's most famous leaders, King David.
So who was this guy, really? I mean, on one hand, he's the unifier who built a nation. On the other, a sinner who made some catastrophic mistakes. And through it all, he becomes a legend. How can one person be all of those things? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack, because his story is this amazing collision of power, faith, and, well, very human weakness. All right, let's get into it.
So where does our story kick off? Well, it starts in total chaos. The previous king, Saul, is dead, and he's left behind a kingdom that's completely fractured and leaderless. It is a massive power vacuum, and the stage is perfectly set for someone new to step in.
And David, well, he does not waste a single second. His rise to power is just a masterclass in strategy. First, he shores up his home base, getting his own tribe, Judah, to back him as king. Smart. But he doesn't stop there. He somehow manages to bring all 12 tribes of Israel together under his rule, which is a huge deal. But the real genius move, capturing Jerusalem. By making this neutral city his capital, he creates a center for both politics and religion that everyone can get behind. Just brilliant.
Okay, so the kingdom's united, and now David's reign really hits its stride. This is his golden age. We're talking about the absolute peak of his power, both as a military leader and as a man of faith. Militarily, the guy was a juggernaut. He does what Saul never could. He just crushes the Philistines and a bunch of other enemies. The kingdom expands, it gets secure, it gets strong. And of course, he builds his palace right there in Jerusalem, which from then on is known as the City of David. He is cementing himself as the undisputed king.
But, it wasn't just about battles and politics. This moment right here is maybe the spiritual high point of his entire reign. He brings the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in all of Israel, into his new capital. And he doesn't do it with some stuffy, formal ceremony. No way. He dances. He dances with everything he's got, right out in public. It's this incredibly passionate display of faith, and it perfectly fuses the nation's spiritual heart with its political one.
So, David is on top of the world. He's got it all. And he decides he wants to do something big for God. But right here, in a wild twist, the story completely pivots. It stops being about what David's going to do for God and starts being about what God is going to do for him. Now check this out, because it all comes down to a play on the word house. David's living in his fancy palace, and he says, you know what? I'm going to build a house for God, meaning a temple, a building. But God's response is on a whole other level. He basically says, David, you're not going to build me a house. I'm going to build you a house. Not a building made of stone, but a royal dynasty, a family line that will last forever. This is the Davidic covenant, and it's a promise that doesn't depend on David being perfect, but on God's faithfulness. It's a total game changer.
And right here, just after receiving this unbelievable, unearned promise, the story takes a nosedive, a dark, tragic turn. Because at the absolute peak of his power, David makes a series of choices that will completely shatter his life and his kingdom.
And this isn't just a personal slip-up, it's a horrifying abuse of his royal power. It starts with adultery with Bathsheba, but then it spirals out of control. To cover it up, David arranges for her husband, Uriah, one of his most loyal soldiers, to be killed in battle. It's just awful. And the fallout is immediate and catastrophic. His family implodes, which leads directly to a brutal civil war led by his very own son, Absalom. Think about that. The great unifier of Israel is now watching his kingdom tear itself apart, all because of what he did.
So, what are we supposed to do with a story like that? 2 Samuel just refuses to give us a simple hero. What it gives us instead is this incredibly raw, honest portrait of a deeply flawed man who is also a deeply important leader. So let's try to break down this very complicated legacy.
And this lays it out perfectly. The story doesn't try to hide the bad stuff. It puts it right there next to all the amazing successes. I mean, on one side, you have the guy who unified a nation, established the capital, and got this incredible promise from God. And on the other side, adultery, murder, a family in ruins, and civil war. It's like his greatest strengths and his worst failures are just sitting there, side by side, forcing us to deal with the messy reality of who he was.
And yet, after all that personal failure and chaos, the book doesn't end with despair. It actually points forward to the future. The final chapters circle back to that promise, reminding us that God's plan for a future king from David's line was never really about David's own perfection. The point is, the promise is way bigger than the man.
So we're left with this incredible tension, right? A hero who is deeply, deeply flawed and causes so much pain, but who is also part of this unfailing, divine promise. The story isn't really trying to give us a perfect role model. It seems to be getting at a much deeper truth. It makes you wonder, maybe a legacy isn't about never failing. Maybe it's about what can endure in spite of our failures.